In the glittering palaces of Saudi Arabia, gold-plated luxury hides a deadly secret. Behind the wealth and power of the royal family lies an unforgivable crime. A crime Princess Amira never imagined she would commit. They found it under my mattress. A simple book. In any other country, this would mean nothing. Here, it meant death. The daughter of one of the kingdom's most powerful men. Now stripped of her title, her wealth, her freedom, all because she dared to read words forbidden to her since birth. Words that would ignite a spiritual awakening that Saudi Arabia's religious police were determined to extinguish. The verdict was clear: execution in 30 days, for possessing a Bible, for questioning the faith of her ancestors, for the greatest crime in the kingdom, apostasy. But what happened next would shake the foundations of the palace walls and force the world to witness an intervention that no royal decree could stop. Before I reveal how Jesus personally intervened in Princess Amira's death sentence, I need you to do something important. This story you're about to hear has been systematically hidden from the mainstream media. They don't want these miraculous interventions to be known. That's why our channel, Jesus Intervened, exists, to document the living reality that Christ still performs miracles today, even in the most closed nations on earth. Hit subscribe right now and turn on notifications, because stories like Princess Amira's need to be heard. Share this video with at least 3 people who need hope today, and stay until the very end, because what happened in that Saudi prison cell might just be the miracle you've been praying for in your own life. Now, let's begin with who Princess Amira was before her world came crashing down. Princess Amira Al Saud was born into unimaginable privilege, the daughter of a prominent prince in the sprawling Saudi royal family. From her earliest memories, she knew only luxury: private jets, designer wardrobes, servants attending to her every need, and education at Europe's finest schools. "I had everything money could buy," Amira would later explain, "but I lived in a golden cage. As a woman, even a royal woman, my life was mapped out for me: who I would marry, how I would behave, what I would believe." Like all Saudi royals, Amira's public devotion to Islam was non-negotiable: 5 daily prayers, proper dress, appropriate behavior. The image of perfect piety maintained the family's religious legitimacy in a kingdom built on strict interpretation of Islamic law. But behind closed doors, Amira harbored questions that began during her years at a Swiss boarding school. There, she had encountered people of different faiths: Christians, Jews, Buddhists, all living according to their consciences without fear. Their freedom fascinated her. "I became curious about other religions," she recalled. "Not because I wanted to rebel, but because I wanted to understand. Why was my family so afraid of these other faiths? What power did they hold?" Her curiosity led her to password-protected websites and encrypted forums where former Muslims and secret believers shared their journeys. For 3 years, she explored these forbidden ideas in absolute secrecy, knowing that even her status couldn't protect her if discovered. Then came the fateful day when her cousin Layla visited from London. A Saudi royal who had privately converted to Christianity while studying abroad, Layla took an enormous risk. Sensing Amira's spiritual hunger, she left behind a small gift before returning to England: a leather-bound New Testament hidden in a hollowed-out fashion book. "The moment I held it, something inside me trembled," Amira said. "Not from fear, though there was plenty of that, but from a strange sense that I was holding something alive, something dangerous, something true." For 6 months, Amira read the Gospels in secret, often late at night in her bathroom, with the shower running to mask any sound. The words of Jesus pierced her heart in ways she couldn't explain: his authority, his compassion, his radical message of grace. They were nothing like the stern, distant deity she had been raised to fear. "I read Jesus' words: 'You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free.' And I wept because I realized I had never been free. Not really. Despite all my privilege, I was a prisoner of fear, As her fascination with Jesus grew, so did her carelessness. Small changes in her behavior caught the attention of palace staff. Missed prayer times, Christian phrases accidentally slipping into conversation, books left open that shouldn't have been there. And then came the betrayal. A trusted maid, searching for valuable jewelry to steal, instead found the forbidden book under Amira's mattress. Recognizing its worth, not in gold, but in leverage, she photographed it and sent the evidence to the religious police. The raid came at dawn. 15 officers stormed Amira's private quarters. Evidence was seized. The princess was arrested. Her father's influence temporarily delayed but couldn't prevent the inevitable. "The last thing I saw was my mother's face," Amira recalled. Not angry, not even disappointed, just terrified. Because she knew what happened to apostates in Saudi Arabia, even royal ones, perhaps especially royal ones, who needed to be made examples of. Within 48 hours, Princess Amira, stripped of her title and royal protections, faced a closed trial where her fate was sealed before it began. The verdict: guilty of apostasy, the abandonment of Islam. The sentence: death by beheading, to be carried out in 30 days after one final chance to publicly renounce her interest in Christianity and reaffirm her Muslim faith. The news sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles but received only minimal international coverage. Saudi Arabia's oil wealth bought the silence of many governments that might otherwise have protested. Her father, forced to choose between his daughter and his position, publicly disowned her to save the family's standing. Amira was transferred to a maximum security women's prison outside Riyadh, placed in solitary confinement in a cell barely large enough for a sleeping mat and toilet. The princess who once slept on silk sheets now lay on concrete, the glamorous royal now dressed in prison gray. "I had lost everything," she said. "My family, my future, my very life. And for what? A book I barely understood, a faith I hadn't even fully embraced. In those first days, I questioned everything. Had it all been a terrible mistake? But something unexpected happened in that cell. Without distractions, without luxury, without options, Amira began to pray. Not the memorized prayers of her childhood, but desperate, honest conversations with the Jesus she had met in the Gospels. I prayed, "Jesus, if you're real, if you're really God, then I need you now, not just to save my life, but to show me if this journey has been worth it. I have nothing left to lose. I have nowhere else to turn." Little did Amira know that her prayer was about to be answered in a way that would transcend the palace walls, international diplomacy, and even the natural world itself. The days in solitary confinement blurred together. Princess Amira, now simply prisoner 7291, marked time by the 5 daily prayer calls echoing from a distant mosque. Ironic, she thought, that the prayers she had increasingly neglected now provided her only sense of structure. Her cell measured 8 feet by 6, smaller than the walk-in closet that had held her designer shoes in the palace. A thin mattress on concrete, a metal toilet, a small window set high in the wall, letting in a rectangle of light that crawled across the floor as the day progressed. Her only clock. The physical deprivation was difficult, but the psychological torture was worse. Guards taunted her hourly, describing in graphic detail the public execution that awaited her. Religious clerics visited daily, pressuring her to renounce her interest in Christianity. Her meals, thin gruel and stale bread, would arrive with Quran verses written on the tray. "Just say the words," a sympathetic female guard whispered through the door slot. "Declare the Shahada again. Renounce the Christian book, and you'll be freed. They don't actually want to execute a princess. It's a political nightmare. Give them a way out." The temptation to recant grew stronger as execution day approached. What did it matter what she said under duress? Couldn't she simply pretend to renounce Christianity, then continue exploring her faith in secret once released? Was martyrdom really necessary in the 21st century? "I remembered reading about the early Christians," Amira recalled. "How they faced lions rather than deny Christ. It had seemed noble but distant when reading in my palace. Now, facing my own execution, their courage convicted me. What was my faith worth if I abandoned it to save myself? By the third week, international pressure had begun to mount. Human rights organizations staged protests outside Saudi embassies. Several European countries threatened sanctions. Social media campaigns with hashtags like #Save Princess Amira and religious freedom gained traction. Inside the palace, the royal family faced a dilemma. Executing Amira would damage international relations and trade agreements. Releasing her would undermine their religious authority within the kingdom. They needed a solution that saved face while ending the growing diplomatic crisis. The king himself finally proposed a compromise. Amira would be given one final chance to publicly recant on live television. If she complied, she would be sent into permanent exile rather than executed, saving her life while still punishing her crime. When this offer was presented, Amira asked for a night to consider it. In reality, she wanted one more night to pray for strength, because despite the tempting offer, something deep inside resisted the public denial of the faith that had brought her this far. That night, exactly 7 days before her scheduled execution, Amira experienced the darkest hour of her imprisonment. Physical weakness from poor nutrition, sleep deprivation from constant light and noise, and psychological strain from isolation combined to break her spirit as never before. "I felt utterly abandoned," she later confessed, "not just by my family and the world, but by God himself. Was this worth it? Would my death change anything? Would anyone even remember my choice a year from now?" The darkness wasn't just around me, it was inside me. In despair, she scratched a crude cross into the cell wall with her fingernail, bloodying her fingers in the process. Pressing her forehead against this makeshift symbol, she whispered what she believed might be her final prayer. "Jesus, I can't do this anymore. If you're real, if you see me, I need you now, not tomorrow, not in heaven after they've killed me, right now. Show me you're with me, or I'll renounce you in the morning. I'm not strong enough for this." Exhausted from weeping, Amira finally collapsed onto her mattress and fell into a fitful sleep as midnight approached. What happened next would forever change her, and eventually, many others around her. The guards would later report that nothing unusual appeared on the security cameras that night. The power didn't fluctuate. No alarms were triggered. According to official records, it was a night like any other in the high-security wing. But inside Cell 12, at approximately 2:17 a.m., Princess Amira awoke to an inexplicable sensation, the feeling of someone sitting on the edge of her mattress. "At first, I thought it was a guard come to torment me," she recounted. "I braced myself for cruelty, but then I noticed something impossible, light filling the room, not harsh fluorescent prison light, but a soft, golden radiance that seemed to breathe. The light had no visible source. It simply existed, illuminating the cell with a warm glow that cast no shadows. And within this light sat a man, watching her with eyes that Amira would later describe as ancient and new at once, like the first moment of creation was happening inside them. She wasn't afraid. That was what surprised her most in retrospect. Despite the impossibility of the situation, a stranger in her locked cell, light with no source, she felt no fear. Instead, a profound peace settled over her, deeper than anything she had ever experienced. "I knew immediately who he was," she said, "not from paintings or descriptions. Jesus looked nothing like Western art portrays him. I knew him because every cell in my body recognized him. The author of life was sitting 3 feet away, and my soul knew its creator." The man smiled, a gesture so filled with understanding that Amira began to weep. Not from sorrow, but from the sudden release of every burden she had carried. The fear of execution, the pain of family rejection, the uncertainty of her faith journey. Then he spoke, not in English or Arabic, yet she understood perfectly. "Daughter, your prayers have been heard." The voice resonated not just in her ears, but throughout her body, as if each word restructured her at a molecular level. Amira found herself unable to respond, overwhelmed by the presence before her. "The path you walk is not easy," he continued, "but you do not walk it alone. I have never left you, not in your palace, not in this cell." With gentle authority, he reached toward the crude cross she had scratched into the wall. As his fingers traced the symbol, the bloodstains and scratches transformed, the mark now appearing as if inlaid with light rather than carved in desperation. "This is my promise to you," he said. "What was an instrument of death has become the doorway to life. Your chains, both seen and unseen, are broken." Amira finally found her voice, asking the question that had tormented her. "Will I die tomorrow? Must I sacrifice my life?" The visitor's expression held both compassion and conviction as he replied, "Some of my beloved ones I call to martyrdom, and they receive a crown that never fades. Others I call to live as witnesses. Your path is to live, Amira. Tomorrow you will speak truth without fear. The words will be given to you. And though the cost will remain high, many will find freedom through your journey. When I seem most absent, I am nearest. Remember this in the days to come." As he spoke these words, the light didn't dim, but rather seemed to transfer from the room into Amira herself. A warmth spread through her body, settling in her chest, not as emotion, but as tangible presence. The visitor was somehow both leaving and remaining at the same time. "I am with you always," were the final words she heard, as the physical form before her dissolved into the light, which then gently faded. Amira sat motionless for hours afterward, clutching her chest where the warmth remained. Dawn broke. The call to prayer sounded. Guards delivered breakfast. But she barely noticed these external realities. Something fundamental had shifted inside her. Fear had been replaced with unshakable certainty. "I wasn't the same person," she explained. "Before that night, I was interested in Christianity, curious about Jesus, willing to die rather than deny him, but still full of doubts. After the visitation, there was no question. I had encountered the living Christ. My execution no longer terrified me, not because I was brave, but because I knew with absolute certainty that death wasn't the end." When officials arrived later that morning to hear her decision about the public recantation, they found a transformed woman. Gone was the frightened, exhausted princess. In her place stood someone with quiet dignity and unexpected joy. "I will speak on television," she told them simply. "I am ready to address the nation." The officials exchanged relieved glances, assuming she had chosen the pragmatic path of renunciation. Arrangements were quickly made for a nationwide broadcast the following day. Her words carefully scripted, the ceremony of her return to Islam meticulously planned. What no one realized was that Amira had no intention of reading their script. The words that would come had been promised from a different source entirely. "If you're still with me, I know this story is touching something deep within your soul. This is just one of many testimonies we share on Jesus Intervened, where we document how Christ continues to work miracles in people's lives today." Before we continue to the most dramatic part of Princess Amira's story, take a moment to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our weekly stories of divine intervention. Your support helps us share these powerful testimonies with the world. Now, let's witness what happened when a Saudi princess, filled with the presence of Jesus, stood before her nation. The broadcast was scheduled for prime time. Government officials had carefully orchestrated every detail, from Amira's modest but elegant attire, conveying both respect for tradition and royal dignity, to the somber backdrop of the Grand Mosque. Religious authorities stood nearby, ready to officially welcome her back to the faith. The king himself would make an appearance after her recantation, granting royal pardon before her exile. International media had been denied access. This would be a strictly internal Saudi broadcast, allowing the regime to control the narrative completely. Princess Amira's misguided spiritual exploration would be presented as a cautionary tale with a redemptive ending, reinforcing the kingdom's religious authority while appearing merciful. Amira arrived under heavy guard, her demeanor puzzlingly serene. Several officials noted the change in her appearance, a luminous quality that they attributed to relief at her impending pardon. The reality was something none of them could have comprehended. From the moment I awoke that morning, I felt his presence, Amira recalled. Not as an emotional sensation, but as a living reality more concrete than the guards or walls around me. I was literally never alone. As cameras prepared to roll, a senior religious cleric approached with her script, the carefully worded renunciation of Christianity and reaffirmation of Islamic faith that would save her life. Amira accepted the paper with a smile, but didn't look at it. "You understand the importance of following these exact words," the cleric whispered sternly. "Deviation will not be tolerated. The king's mercy extends only to complete compliance." Amira nodded politely. "I understand completely." The broadcast began with a solemn introduction by the Minister of Islamic Affairs, explaining the grave situation and the royal family's merciful resolution. Viewers across Saudi Arabia watched with rapt attention. This unprecedented public handling of royal apostasy had been the topic of hushed conversations for weeks. Then, the camera turned to Princess Amira. Later, those present would struggle to describe what happened next. Some insisted the lighting in the studio changed, though technicians found no evidence of this. Others claimed the princess's voice somehow bypassed the microphones, reaching them directly. All agreed that something unexplainable occurred the moment Amira began to speak. She set aside the prepared script and looked directly into the camera. Her first words sent shockwaves through the control room. "I stand before you today, not to renounce my faith, but to affirm it." Producers frantically signaled to cut the broadcast, but engineers would later report that their equipment mysteriously failed to respond. Every attempt to silence her transmission failed. For 7 uninterrupted minutes, Princess Amira addressed a nation that had never heard words like these spoken publicly. "I was born into privilege, but lived in spiritual poverty," she continued. "I was surrounded by wealth, yet starving for truth. And then I encountered Jesus Christ, not as a historical figure or a prophet, but as the living God who steps into prison cells and breaks chains that no human power can touch." With eloquence that stunned even her critics, Amira shared her journey, from curiosity to conviction, from royal prisoner to child of God. She described her visitation without sensationalism, speaking of Jesus with the natural familiarity of someone describing a beloved friend. "I do not stand here to attack the faith of my ancestors or to disrespect my family," she clarified. "I stand simply as one who has encountered the living Christ and cannot pretend otherwise. Jesus said, 'You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free.' Today, though I may lose my earthly freedom, I stand before you completely free in spirit." As she spoke, something extraordinary happened across the kingdom. Viewers reported inexplicable sensations, warmth in their chests, tears they couldn't explain, a profound sense of being personally addressed. In thousands of homes, people who had gathered to witness a princess's humiliation instead encountered something that transcended politics and religion. Amira concluded with words that would be remembered and repeated in secret gatherings for years to come. "I don't know what happens tomorrow. I may be executed for these words, but I want every person watching to know this. Jesus is not bound by borders, traditions, or laws. He is not intimidated by power or stopped by persecution. And he is reaching out to Saudi Arabia with a love that casts out fear. He has visited me, and he can visit you too." The broadcast abruptly cut to emergency programming, but the damage, or miracle, depending on perspective, was done. An estimated 70% of Saudi citizens had witnessed Amira's testimony. Within minutes, despite the kingdom's strict internet controls, clips began circulating internationally. The royal response was immediate and severe. Amira was forcefully removed from the studio and returned to prison, her execution now seemingly inevitable. Emergency meetings convened at the highest levels of government. Religious authorities issued immediate condemnations and explanations. But something had fundamentally shifted in the spiritual atmosphere of the nation. Princess Amira's words had found fertile ground in unexpected places, including the hearts of several people within the palace itself. "When they brought me back to my cell," Amira later revealed, "one of the guards slipped me a note. It said simply, 'I believe you. I saw him too, as you were speaking. You are not alone.' I realized then that Jesus hadn't just come for me, but for many others through me." As midnight approached on what she believed would be her final night alive, Amira felt no fear. The presence that had filled her cell previously now resided within her. Whether facing execution or miracle, she was at peace. What she could not have known was that extraordinary events were already unfolding outside her cell, events that would challenge the boundaries between the physical and spiritual realms, between political power and divine intervention. Dawn broke on execution day with an unusual meteorological phenomenon that meteorologists would later struggle to explain. A dense fog enveloped Riyadh, unprecedented in the desert capital, especially during that season. Visibility dropped to mere feet, grounding flights and halting the city's morning commute. Inside the prison, preparations for Amira's execution continued despite the weather. The royal family, embarrassed and enraged by her televised testimony, had ordered the execution expedited and moved inside the prison walls. No public spectacle, no international witnesses, just swift elimination of the problem she represented. At precisely 7 a.m., 6 guards approached her cell. The execution was scheduled for 8 a.m. in the prison courtyard, with only essential witnesses present. Amira, who had spent the night in prayer, rose calmly to her feet as the door swung open. What happened next would be recorded in the official report as a security anomaly, but the guards involved would later describe it very differently. The princess was standing in the center of her cell, surrounded by light. One guard later testified in secret. Not reflected light or a light source we could identify, she herself seemed to be emanating it. "We were trained for riots, smuggled weapons, suicide attempts. Not this. No protocol existed for a prisoner glowing from within." The lead guard, a veteran officer with 20 years' experience, ordered Amira to come with them. She complied without resistance, yet as they attempted to place shackles on her wrists, each guard reported the same inexplicable experience. Their hands would not close the restraints, not as if blocked by physical force, but as if their own bodies refused to complete the action. Disturbed but determined, they escorted her without restraints through corridors that should have been busy with prison staff. Instead, they encountered an eerie emptiness. Security cameras would later show that personnel had been present, but had suddenly received urgent calls or felt compelled to attend to matters elsewhere, leaving the path unusually clear. Outside the prison, the situation grew increasingly strange. Communications began failing across multiple government channels. The execution witnesses, religious officials, royal representatives, medical staff, all reported transportation issues, preventing their arrival. The fog thickened around the prison perimeter specifically, while clearing in other parts of the city. Inside, Amira walked in silence, aware that something supernatural was occurring, but not understanding its purpose. Was this divine intervention to prevent her execution, or merely grace to face it with dignity? Either way, she remained at peace, the warmth in her chest a constant reminder of the presence that had never left her. As the small procession approached the courtyard, the most inexplicable event occurred. The massive steel door leading to the execution site, a door requiring electronic authorization and 2 guard keys, stood open. No record of its unlocking appeared in the security logs. Beyond it, instead of the expected courtyard, lay a service corridor not normally accessible from that route. The guards hesitated, confused by the impossible architecture before them. In that moment of confusion, something like a whisper, heard not with ears but within their minds, urged them to look away, just for a moment. When they turned back seconds later, Princess Amira was gone. The subsequent manhunt was the largest in Saudi history, though its details were kept strictly classified. Every airport, border crossing, and checkpoint was placed on highest alert. Facial recognition systems scanned crowds across the kingdom. The official story that a mentally unstable royal had escaped custody became front-page news internationally. But Princess Amira had vanished completely. 3 days later, as Saudi authorities expanded their search to neighboring countries, a social media post appeared from an anonymous account. It contained only a photograph. Amira, dressed simply but freely, standing beside a window that architecture experts would later identify as being in Istanbul, Turkey. Her face showed no triumph or defiance, only peace. The post went viral within hours before being removed from major platforms. By then, millions had seen tangible proof that the condemned princess had somehow escaped the most secure prison in Saudi Arabia. What the photo didn't reveal was how she had escaped. Even Amira herself couldn't fully explain the sequence of events. In her later testimony, recorded once safely granted asylum in Switzerland, she described only fragments. After the guards looked away, I felt a hand take mine, though I saw no one. A voice, the same voice from my cell, said simply, "Follow me." I was led through passages that shouldn't have existed, past people who didn't seem to see me. Doors opened before we reached them. I remember the fog, and then somehow being in a car, driven by someone I'd never met who said only, "I was told to expect you." The diplomatic fallout was handled with practiced Saudi efficiency. Princess Amira was officially stripped of citizenship, her name purged from royal records. The broadcast was attributed to clever video manipulation by foreign operatives. The guards involved in her transport were relocated to remote posts after extensive retraining. But beneath the surface, something profound had shifted in the spiritual landscape of Saudi Arabia. In the months following Amira's escape, reports emerged of small gatherings in private homes, Saudis meeting to discuss her testimony and read smuggled Christian literature. Several palace staff quietly left Islam after witnessing unexplainable events surrounding her detention. The female guard who had slipped Amira the supportive note eventually fled to Jordan, where she was baptized and began working with refugee ministries. Most significantly, Princess Amira's cousin Layla, the one who had originally given her the Bible, established a digital ministry specifically reaching Saudi women questioning their faith. Operating from London under careful security, the ministry reported hundreds of online inquiries monthly from within the kingdom. From her new home in Switzerland, Amira eventually began sharing her testimony with small, secure gatherings. Never seeking publicity or political influence, she focused instead on supporting persecuted believers across the Middle East through prayer and discreet financial assistance. My story isn't about a political victory or religious freedom in Saudi Arabia. Those battles continue, she explained to a gathering of former Muslims in Geneva. My story is about Jesus' faithfulness even in the darkest places. He doesn't always prevent persecution, but he always provides his presence through it. Sometimes that presence comes as strength to endure. Sometimes it comes as supernatural intervention. But it always comes to those who seek him. The miracle isn't just that Jesus helped me escape execution. The miracle is that he enters our prisons, whether physical cells or spiritual bondage, and offers freedom that no government can revoke and no executioner can take away. 2 years after her escape, on the anniversary of her visitation, Amira received an encrypted message from someone still working in the Saudi palace. The crude cross she had scratched into her cell wall had never been removed, despite multiple attempts to plaster over it. Each time it was covered, the marking would mysteriously reappear within days. Eventually, authorities simply reassigned the cell, leaving it vacant. Prison staff whispered that at night, light sometimes seeped from beneath its door. What prison are you facing today? It might not have concrete walls, but it holds you just as surely. The same Jesus who appeared in Princess Amira's cell is reaching out to you right now, ready to intervene in your situation. If this story has touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Subscribe to Jesus Intervened for more testimonies of Christ's miraculous work in our world. And remember, no matter how dark your circumstance, Jesus still visits those who call on him. Thank you for watching until the end. This is Jesus Intervened, where we document the living reality that our Savior's work didn't end at the cross. It continues today in the lives of people just like you.